voyage views from glorious Dubai. Now behind me is a floating piece of British maritime history. I bring you the one and only QE2, which has been a floating hotel here in Dubai since April 2018. Now some fun facts about this amazing ship. It had 25 captains, circumnavigated the globe 25 times, crossed the Atlantic no fewer than 812 times, and served a whopping 2.5 million passengers. And there's so much more history to share with you. Now, do remember, for those amazing discounted rates for airline and travel industry staff, do not forget to log on to the Staff Travel Voyage website. Follow me to see exactly what this floating piece of history has to offer. Here at the QE2, there's an exhibition area with this amazing scale model of the QE2, and it's a real reminder of the privilege of staying on the ship, which I'm going to do tonight, lucky me. Now, the ship is in fact associated with another British travel icon, I'm sure many of you are familiar, Concorde, which of course, again, like the QE2, is consigned to Britain's travel history. Now, typically the well-heeled would fly on Concorde to New York and then sail home on the QE2. What a lucky bunch they were. Now, if you're going to stay on the QE2, well, that's fantastic in itself, but before you even step on the ship, you should spend a good deal of time here and just have a look at all the relics. They've got the original books from the library, this bell, to name but a few, and it really is a step back in time. Moment has come. I've waited all my life. In fact, I never thought this chance would come to walk on the historic one and only QE2. And my grandfather, Ron Hudspeth, was actually a saxophonist on this ship between London and New York. So this is a very poignant moment. Well, there's so much history on this ship. I'm surprised they haven't done QE2, the movie, yet. Well, here I am on the deck of the yacht club here on the one and only QE2, and just imagine how many incredible memories were created here on this deck as it crisscrossed the Atlantic. Now, if you were lucky enough to actually have sailed on it and you're staying here, I'm sure within an instant those memories will just come flooding back. This is another incredible part of the QE2 where memories were made. This is a boat deck and basically a promenade and the highest point on the ship for passengers. So again, picture the scene, you know, you're here on the ship for days at sea and just gazing out to that beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Staff Travel Voyage viewers, welcome to your hotel room. Have you forgotten already what you're on? It's not any old hotel room, it's a floating one, and it's the one and only QE2. And as if you need a reminder, your room key has it on here. I'm so excited to see these rooms. Let's go and have a look. So here is your deluxe sea view room here on the QE2. Now, this is the original cabin size when the ship sailed. Obviously, since it came out of service, it's had a refurbishment. So what do we have? Beautifully sized king-size bed here, and good sized television. A rather lovely welcome gift of fruit, a huge portion here. And this, look at this beautiful touch, the QE2, a rather sweet treat, very impressed. But for me, the truly QE2 aspect of this room will be the view outside. Let's have a look. And that's because you are in a room with original features. The portholes here, and if I look outside, I can see the sea. And lots of Dubai sunshine. And you really do feel the moment you step on this ship, you're immersed in an incredible piece of maritime history. Travel voyage viewers, I feel utterly privileged to be in the company of one Peter Warwick, who ended his 5-year career on this ship as cruise director, and he has offered to take me around the ship and show me his personal history.
Let's go and have a look around the QE2.
Let's go.
And indeed, here we are then at the second mural of the midships lobby, and this was added actually in the '94 refit, Cunard commissioning the artist Peter Sutton to do these particular murals. This in particular shows the Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary, two huge Atlantic liners, dominated the waves for a good 30 years, and there are rumours to suggest that they would pass each other in the opposite direction, crossing the Atlantic, and passengers would wave, hoping perhaps they knew somebody on these both of the liners there. But frankly speaking, the Atlantic was quite lonely. I've waved at many a dolphin before, just seeing some sign of life. But interestingly, in a sense, King George V did decree that after the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, that every engineer of the future would wear a stripe of royal purple on his uniform in recognition and memoriam of all the engineers that lost their lives during the sinking, and I believe that is still true to this day. And welcome on board, sir. Welcome on board, madam, is exactly the thing I would be saying, because I stood here, viewers, 26 years ago, welcoming passengers on board the QE2 prior to our sailing around the world. They would come on here, shake our hands, and they'd often say, "We are home now." And that's because it was home to so many people, regardless of which way we were going. And in fact, really, we would say then, welcome home to them. And it really was quite a remarkable experience. You'll see here, actually, if we pan around, you've got this fiberglass structure. This never actually changed in the 39-year career of the QE2. Very much a space influence and designed to be perhaps spaceship-esque. And as I say, that did stay. On the other hand, the interior here did change in 1994 for the very last time, where these wooden panels added the blue seats. And Cunard commissioning the artist Peter Sutton to paint these murals, really on his perspective of the Cunard line between the 1840s and, shall we say, the present day.
Now viewers, as you heard me say earlier in the exhibition area, there was a link between the iconic QE2 and the prestigious Concorde, and that link, that special relationship between those two is depicted here in this gorgeous painting here. So Concorde, QE2, New York, the very recognisable Sydney, but the one and only Peter Warwick explains his link between Concorde and the QE2.
Yes, indeed, viewers. We have here the Concorde here, the QE2, a lovely mural. And really, there was such a special relationship between British Airways and Cunard. And in fact, Cunard actually sort of commissioning the Concorde, really, back in those years, which actually did fly passengers over to New York. They would lunch at, for example, the Astoria, and they would sail back on the QE2. You could do that the other way around, for example, but in my 6 years of service, that did seem more popular. And in fact, I sat sat in this midships lobby all those years ago discussing this, and you see here the lovely Concorde. I mean, it really was an icon of travel, and indeed, you know, had a very special, as I say, relationship with the QE2. Many passengers, in fact, really loving this particular deal. People would often say to me, actually, as we discuss this mural here, as we have the New York skyline, our second home, we have the Sydney Opera House, people would often say to me, Pete, what's your favourite port of call that you've been to in 6 years? I can't answer with honesty, because how can you compare Fiji with Hong Kong? I mean, it's not comparable. I would suggest, if I had to be pushed on that, that it would be from Los Angeles to India, where you have that gorgeous sort of 9-week run of taking in those continents. But one port is very difficult to say, to be honest. But again, the Concorde, beautiful, iconic symbol of British tradition, as was the QE2.
Well, viewers, isn't this magnificent? Quite surprised to find on a QE2, and the only model that actually hasn't been removed from the ship. This is an impressive 1:50 scale model of the steamship Mauretania. Now, steam predated diesel electric, and in fact, the QE2 was initially steam powered, and then it was converted to diesel electric because the owners had faith in the ship, and it did continue to sail for many years afterwards. Peter Warwick explains more.
And yes, the Mauretania here. I mean, I think one fascinating thing about this ship is she took 2.5 years to build because she was built entirely by hand. I mean, can you imagine the patience? These wooden oars carved out by hand. The wooden decking, for example, every piece you see was carved out by hand. Frankly, I wouldn't have the patience, but really is quite something indeed. She was sailing from 1907 to 1936, and that included transatlantic voyages, it included cruises, and indeed war service. One a fascinating point, or comedic point really, the funnels you see here are pointing slightly to the left. One could suggest either that the steam was blown away from the ship, or it gives the impression of speed. I don't know frankly if that's true or not, but nonetheless it's a bit of a quip, and there are suggestions that this last funnel could be fake. I don't know if that is true, but I do know the last funnel on the Titanic was fake. It was a question of a four funnel ship looked grander than a 2 or a 3. Hyacinth Bucket, for example, would only go on a 4, as she was on here in 95 doing a Christmas special. But nonetheless, the Mauretania. One other interesting fact about Cunard ships, really, if the ending of the ship name is IA, Mauretania, Coronia, the ear suggests she was Cunard. If, on the other hand, the ending of the ship is IC, the IC suffix, Britannic, Titanic, that suggests White Star Line. They were two different companies merging in 1934, forming the Cunard White Star Line.
Viewers, I've now arrived in the chart room here on the QE2, and there's just so much history here. Countless discussions over cocktails and drinks into the early hours, crossing the Atlantic, and the one Peter Warwick explains just how personal this room is to him.
Well, indeed, yes, in the chart room. And I mean, metaphorically speaking, can you imagine, viewers, leaving your office now and 19 years later coming back and seeing your desk in exactly the same position? Because really, this green leather was here when I was in service all those years ago. These chairs, the crossing, North Atlantic crossing map here, really, and that is a map, we can't argue that, but with suggestion, and that is the Atlantic crossing, of which we did 812 crossings in 39 years, 25 captains taking the helm of the QE2, which it was a privilege to serve under for myself, and in fact we transported 2.5 million passengers over 6 million miles. But I mean, the room itself, very personal. Let's go just down here to consider not the chairs, but the area here. Now, many regular passengers came in here, 2 of which got married on the bridge of the ship in 92, and would sit here. Now, they would each buy one of the most expensive suites for themselves for 4 months. They would buy a suite for their luggage for 4 months. And in fact, what they spent on accommodation and drink during the world cruise of 4 months would pay for the fuel for the entire ship's world cruise. I mean, it was astonishing. We would have a drink bought by them to celebrate their birthday. That's 1,000 crew. That's a large round by any stretch of the imagination. But really quite something. In fact, 26 years ago, I sat in this very seat here, where I'm going to sit now. and I haven't aged in a day. Thank you very much. But it really was quite something indeed. And you know, these walls could talk many stories, but one also important thing I feel is this antique chest of drawers. Walnut, to be precise, containing maps of different ports of call that we would stay in or go to from time to time. And in fact, passengers would look at these, you know, on many occasions, perhaps there's something to do or just to check the captain knew what he was doing. But it really was quite something indeed. And while we're in here, before we go, just as a point of note, the Britannia figure down the other end of the room, you may see that there, that was actually presented by Lloyd's of London for the maiden voyage of the QE2 in 1969 and was taken off the ship actually in 2002 to be repaired on HMS Belfast on the Thames before representing back to the Captain Warwick and the QE2 later on in that year.
If you're on a QE2, you're at sea for days, so how do you fill your time? Well, you can chit chat, you can eat, sleep and read, and this was the original QE2 library with an astonishing 6,000 titles, and this was the adjacent bookshop, so you were never short of a good read on this ship. Well, viewers, this was the dance floor here on the QE2, and the one Peter Warwick has a little surprise in his phone. So this lady here was the last surviving passenger, Milvina Dean, with Peter. There we go. And you danced on this floor, didn't you, Peter?
Indeed, the last surviving remaining passenger of the Titanic disaster, Milvina, sailed with us in 1995. We had a dance on here as part of my job, actually, every evening, was to ballroom dance with all the single ladies. It was a very tough ask, but we managed it very well indeed. And in fact, another significant lady, apart from Milvina, was Beatrice Muller, who actually in 2000 lived on this ship for over 8 years. And I've only disembarked here in 2008 when she had no choice but to get off. But we had many dances on here. She would say, I don't want to leave my home, and that was very significant, and it, I think, gets across this ship was home to so many people, and any of us in the travel industry perhaps can resonate with that, and frankly, as crew and ex-passenger myself, didn't care where I sailed. The ship was the destination.
On the one and only QE2, there were 6 dining options. This, the Lido, was the informal dining option if you didn't fancy dressing up. And the sign here is actually original, and it was a buffet. So let's take a walk through maritime dining history. So here we are inside the iconic Lido. Now it's a restaurant now, but back in the day, prior to 1994, it was a nightclub and swimming pool. And the ceiling, in fact, retracted so that you could be swimming under those beautiful stars. So viewers, here I am in the beautiful Pavilion restaurant. Now back in the day, you just grab a burger right here and take it out onto the deck. But today it's an a la carte dining option, and in fact, it reopened after a refurbishment 2 days ago. Now, one fantastic thing about the QE2, and that many people who have sailed on it really respect, is the fact that many of the features, in fact most of the rooms, have the original features in place, as the one and only Peter Warwick explains.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think one fascinating feature about the QE2 from my point of view is many, in fact, I think nearly all the features in most public rooms have remained the same. And that's very significant when you have many memories and sort of treasured moments with the ship. For example, you know, the Grand Lounge, exactly the same. The pub, I can remember sitting in there in 1999 with the same furniture. And really, I will say this. If I'd have come here 16 months ago and this had been a Neon hotel, without any disrespects, I would have flown straight home to London. It's a history that has kept her alive, and the history that will. And you know, how they've restored and maintained the ship to its former glory, shall we say, is nothing short of outstanding.
The QE2 being a unique place to stay and dine here in Dubai, believe it or not, you can rent an office space here So you can stay, sleep, eat, and work. Now, another piece of truly fascinating QE2 history is right here in the Golden Lion pub. This being now the oldest pub in Dubai. Now, the walls here are adorned with shields, so it was traditional for a ship when it made its maiden stop in a port to be presented with a shield. And Peter Warwick explains more.
So yes, indeed, in the pub, I mean, this tradition goes back years. In fact, the first time this happened was in 1840, when Samuel Cunard arrived in Boston for the very first time, and he was presented then with a silver cup, a Boston silver cup, shall we say, that commemorated the first ever visit to the port by that ship. That tradition still carries on today, and I would suggest that 2/3 of the shields we have in the pub are maiden port of call exchange gifts. Some are given by travel agents, by local mayors and that, so on and so forth, but traditionally most of these would be on maiden port, with the exception of the shields on one side of the wall, which are relating to the Falkland Islands conflict, when the ship was a troop carrier in May 1982. But yes, the Golden Lion, again, really the oldest pub in Dubai, beautiful furniture, lovely food here, and anybody is welcome to come for a meal, whether you are a resident or not.
I cannot believe, viewers, this moment has finally come. I never thought it would. But I'm about to eat on the one and only QE2. Not sail on it, but have a meal on it here in the Lido restaurant, which serves a delicious buffet from 7 p.m. At the swimming pool and gym here on the one and only QE2, located on deck 7, open daily from 7 a.m. Now it's at this point, viewers, I'll introduce you to a quirk of the floor numbering system on the ship. So the higher the number, the lower you are on the ship. So this is deck 7, so this is pretty low. My cabin is deck 2, and that's pretty high. So it did take about a minute or so to get my head around this when I first boarded. Now, this pool is the pool on the ship today. Back in the day, when the ship was at sea, you'd have a pool and nightclub where the Lido restaurant now is, with a retractable roof. Well, a very good morning, Staff Travel Voyage viewers. Now, I'm back in the Lido restaurant here on the one and only QE2, but it's breakfast time, and breakfast takes on a whole new perspective because I get a beautiful sea view. So I am on the QE2 having breakfast at sea, a moment I thought would never come, and really does emphasize what an incredible piece of floating maritime history the QE2 is. So there you have it, viewers, an amazing piece of British floating history which can actually stay on the one and only QE2.